Morning, the Prime Minister reassuring Australians from the Situation Room in Canberra. I'm Patricia Karvelas, live from the lands of the Wurundjeri people in Melbourne. Welcome to Afternoon Briefing. Political leaders across the country have warned there's a risk Tropical Cyclone Alfred could be more intense than first expected as it makes landfall, because it's now set to cross later than first forecast. The system, which might now be downgraded to Category 1, is forecast to reach land at the early hours of Saturday morning, most likely between Maroochydore and Coolangatta. We're going to take you in a moment to a live press conference from the Queensland Premier, so we'll be bringing you that as soon as it starts. Opposition leader Peter Dutton has pulled out of a Liberal Party fundraiser in Melbourne after it was reported he left a briefing on the cyclone to make his way to Sydney for a fundraiser. Mr Dutton's office has refused to provide comment. I'll talk to our chief digital correspondent Jacob Grieber about the delicate politics of the cyclone later this hour. The United States has cut off intelligence sharing with Ukraine for the first time since 2022, just days after President Donald Trump and President Volodymyr Zelensky clashed in the Oval Office. Will the US's hardline approach force Ukraine to a deal with Russia over the conflict? I'll ask former Australian Attorney-General George Brandis. We can now take you live to where the Queensland Premier is speaking.
Hours, 184 millimetres at Upper Running Creek, 114 at Springbrook, and parts of the Sunny Coast got 77 mils. This system will provide a challenge across those four key areas, but if you do the preparation, it is a system that you will be able to handle. And we are doing the preparation to show Queenslanders how important it is that you do get ready. And I have to say, overwhelmingly, the response has been remarkable. And particularly in the last 24 hours, there has been a real awareness. And I do want to thank Queenslanders for the way that they have responded. And I know as a result of many people who have done our work for us in going to reach out to vulnerable people, to go and reach out to colleagues at work, to speak to neighbours, that has made all the difference. And some of the commentary that we're getting back suggests that this really has been a great effort across the board. Just a couple of operational things from me. There's been over 700 requests from SES for assistance. The vast majority of those around preparation around the home, particularly sandbagging. If you are vulnerable, if you are unable to assist yourself, 132 500 is the number for the SES, and they'll continue to do that work. Door knocking continues in those areas that had been identified by local government. And I'm talking about the storm tide area, but also some of those other low-lying parts. Please familiarise yourself with that. If you go to disaster.qld.gov.au, all of the local governments have their disaster dashboard there. With one click, it'll take you onto your council, and on there you will get that information around those maps, and with that you can make an informed choice about where you are. Have an evacuation plan, and the best one of those is, can you go and stay with friends or family? It's the most comfortable place. It's the safest place. For those who can't, I stress that we continue to see the councils gear up to provide refuge centres. There are currently 26 that have been identified across the area, and we thank Council for mobilising those, and we sincerely think that is a valuable service. I spoke this morning about those vulnerable Queenslanders, those homeless who are sleeping rough, and as we speak right now, we have staff from housing again on the ground going to notify them that there is options available for them. If you wish to report that and assist someone who you see may need help, I mentioned this morning I'd get that number. It's 1800 474 753. The work also continues across those aged care providers, and we've been heartened by the feedback we've got from those aged care operators as well as the local governments in that area. I want to talk briefly about some of the additional resources, and it's really particularly important that you hear from the contributors who will be coming after me. But SES police, fireys, we have swift water rescue crews who have been pre-positioned in areas where swift water rescue may be necessary. Energex, and Peter this morning outlined how we continue to drive those numbers. They are actively trying to reconnect some of those areas that have lost power where it remains safe to do so. But once the system does get closer to the coast and those winds and rain become more intense, those crews will be waiting, pre-positioned, to get out there the moment that they can. And they have those people to work with to make sure that vegetation is cleared, because often that is the greatest impediment. So all of that is ready to respond. And the safest place for you is to be in your home, obviously, after that system goes through. Community recovery hubs are also being planned. They are a one-stop shop where people can go in and get assistance, which is why it is vital as part of your preparations, get all those key documents that you have them in one spot. If you do need to evacuate as part of that plan, grabbing those make it so much easier. But regardless, it's good to keep in one location at a time like this. Again, there are 1,030 schools that are closed and will remain closed tomorrow. We'll continue to assess into the future, and we'll update people as to what that looks like after the system goes through. But all that information is on the disaster.qld.gov.au website. You can Google school closures Queensland as well, but that will continue to be available. Finally, the 4 key challenges remain, and that remains our focus. And we want Queenslanders to remain engaged in it. There are waves, there is wind, there is rainfall, and there will be flooding. But none of those challenges are insurmountable. And I have every faith in the work that has been done to date. I have every faith in the capability of our team to respond. And I know how great Queenslanders are at recovering after events. I'm going to hand over to Matt.
Thank you, Premier, and good afternoon. Tropical Cyclone Alfred remains a Category 2 system and is currently 240 kilometres east of Brisbane. It is moving west at around 7 kilometres per hour towards the southeast Queensland coast as we speak. We already covered the fact that TC Alfred moved quite erratically overnight last night, and that has delayed the forecast for it to move towards the coast. We're still expecting the centre of the system to cross the Bay Islands very late on Sunday or in the early hours of Saturday morning, and then push across the bay and into the mainland areas during Saturday, with the most likely track for the system moving between the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast. The system is expected to impact the outer edge of the Bay Islands as a Category 2 system, with average winds near the centre of around 95 kilometres per hour and gusts possibly reaching up to as much as 150 kilometres per hour. And again, these will be concentrated around the southern flank of the system. A tropical cyclone warning remains in place from Double Island Point to south of the Queensland-New South Wales border, and coastal hazards for large waves and abnormally high tides, as well as severe weather, which covers off on the heavy to locally intense rainfall, are also current. I'll work through a few of the impacts. We have already seen damaging wind gusts on those exposed coastal locations, with the outer Moreton Bay area receiving gusts above 90 kilometres per hour, which is the sort of damaging wind threshold that we use. Those winds are expected to continue increasing as we move through today, and then continue increasing through Friday as well. The potential for destructive winds, so those gusts up to 150 kilometres per hour, are expected on those exposed coastal locations as Tropical Cyclone Alfred approaches and crosses those Bay Islands late on Friday and through Saturday. Large swells and powerful waves have been observed along the Queensland coast for several days now, and we are seeing inundation and extreme wave heights. We've recorded waves of 12.3 metres off the Gold Coast, so those extreme waves are causing hazards to the coastal areas. TC Alfred is also expected to produce a significant storm surge around the southern side of the system. This means that as the system crosses, sea levels may be 0.5 to 1 metre above the normal highest tide. And in fact, the really exposed locations around the Gold Coast and the Redlands Southern Bay area, it is possible to see storm surges up to 1.5 metres. We're starting to see some of the heavy rainfall push across the Gold Coast and then stretch up through the scenic rim along the Bay Islands and into Brisbane. On the current radar imagery, you can see the banding moving around the cyclone. Again, we expected that to continue through this evening and into Friday, with daily rainfall totals possible of 300 to 400 millimetres, stretching through Friday and into Saturday. This could mean event totals up to as much as 800 millimetres. This heavy to intense rainfall is expected to produce both flash and riverine flooding. And we do have flood watches current for minor to major flooding across the Mary River, the creeks and rivers of the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast, the upper and lower Brisbane River catchments, as well as the Logan Albert and the Condamine and McIntyre rivers. Tropical cyclone, as I said, remains a Category 2 system. It is moving slower than we expected, and it did move slower overnight last night. But I reiterate that it is still moving at 7 kilometres per hour towards the southeast Queensland coast, and we expect it to continue to do so. Those hazards around the wind, the rainfall, storm surge and flood risks remain, and we will see those pick up as the system approaches. The movement and the strength of Tropical Cyclone Alfred as it approaches the Bay Islands and then moves across towards Brisbane will be extremely complex. And the Bureau will continue to monitor the satellite imagery, the radar imagery, as well as that modelling information, and update our warnings very regularly. So I urge the community to stay up to date with those regularly updated warnings on the Bureau app and the Bureau webpage, and stay alert for that updated messaging from emergency services. Thanks.
And good afternoon. I spoke this morning about the flood risk, and we've seen those flood watches remain in place from the Mary River all the way down to the Gold Coast. As we've heard, the Bureau is forecasting rain up to 800 millimetres in some of those places over coming days. I just want to say this is significant rainfall that won't only cause flash flooding in the areas that, of the most impacted areas, but prolonged riverine flooding, and it's important that we are now preparing for this potential rainfall. We're currently working with our local councils regarding the at-risk areas from the flooding, and a number of these councils have already posted modelling up on their dashboards, similar to what they've done with the storm surge modelling. Can I say our riverines, our creeks are very wet and will respond very quickly to intense rainfall as it falls. The emergency services are prepared, they are pre-positioned and they are able to respond, but it's now important that communities understand their risk and start to putting plans in place, not only for the cyclone approaching, the wind, the storm surge, but also for flash flooding and riverine flooding over the next few days, should they be impacted by these events. It's important that we plan just like we've done before, and I already know that people have started sandbagging for flooding, not just storm surge, but we can do the real simple things now if you are in a flood at-risk area, such as lifting your important items, your furniture from low-lying areas in your house and lifting them to higher ground, putting your valuables in a waterproof container so that you can take them with you, valuables, passport, driver's licence, credit cards, and then make sure you have your emergency kit and that you have a plan in place to be able to leave should that flooding occur in your area. And finally, can I just urge people over the coming days when we'll see this rainfall fall, please don't drive through floodwaters. This at-risk behaviour puts yourself, your family, but also our emergency services workers at severe risk when we have to come and rescue you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The Queensland Fire Department's done an immense amount of planning and preparation in order for the crossing of TC Alfred. We're very familiar with cyclone and flood response, however, we're not complacent in our readiness. All our arrangements are in place and our preparations, and we are already very well prepared to respond. We've pre-deployed additional personnel from across Queensland, into southeast Queensland communities, in addition to the significant resources that we already have across the impacted or predicted path of this event. We've established 23 swiftwater hubs with specialist firefighter rescue teams, swiftwater rescue teams, to provide immediate response and capacity across those impacted communities. We've all got an additional 50 locations where first response or initial response to swiftwater rescue can occur to support communities and community response. Fire and rescue crews also stand ready to respond to any other call types that may come up through the course of this event. Beyond response, we're also very much focused on supporting early and rapid recovery of communities. So we've got very much a great deal of planning and preparation has gone into being ready for washout support, rapid damage assessment in order to gain a good understanding of the impact of the events, create that damage assessment that informs further response from other agencies, but also to support debris cleanup, washouts, and some of those other elements that communities need and are essential, and that will be done alongside our State Emergency Service colleagues. We do have hundreds of Rural Fire Service Queensland and Fire and Rescue Service staff and volunteers ready to respond when it is safe to do so to support that recovery. So they're in place and ready to respond as and when conditions are needed. We are ready, but I do ask you all to please heed the warnings and advice that authorities provide and ensure that you make good decisions through that process. Thank you.
My name is Jake Elwood. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. The Queensland Reconstruction Authority was formed in 2011 in the wake of Tropical Cyclone Yasi and the southeast Queensland floods, and has been supporting communities in recovery ever since. And I would say now that we are still very focused on making sure that the recovery with the northern flooding is going on. We are with communities all the way through the recovery process. It has been great to see the preparation that has gone on within the community, and I've got to say, having seen this time and time again, those that are prepared definitely bounce back better after an event. There is no doubt about it. Now, at the moment, obviously, focus is the response. Is the key. Response is the focus at the moment. What will happen in time is that some communities will be in response, others will be in recovery. And so we are ready for that transition, and we'll make sure that there is no daylight between response and recovery. That is vitally important for the community. Now, in terms of recovery, the things that we look at, and I guess the process that we go through, the first is the cleanup. It's vital because families, individuals, they can't move on until things are cleaned up. And we saw wonderful efforts by the SES and the Queensland Fire Department to get that cleanup done so well in the north, and it will again happen here. And I note that we've already activated 12 councils from the Fraser Coast to the Gold Coast to make sure that we are ready for that cleanup. Then we undertake damage assessments to fully understand the damage, how many homes have been moderately, severely or have minor damage, so that we can support community through the recovery process. Then there is the emergency works to make sure that roads or other things that have been damaged are functional and safe to use so that communities can move on. And then we get into the deeper reconstruction. And of course, as always, we make sure that we emerge from these stronger than when we went into it. The Queensland Reconstruction Authority is here for the long haul. We are side by side with community through the process that is recovery. For some it can be short, for some it can be longer, but we will be there side by side, step by step, every step of the way.
Thanks, Jake, and thanks for the work of your team in North and Far North Queensland as well, mate. Time for a couple of questions.
I mean, in terms of bridges,
Hello,
roads and things like that,
Yeah.
when do you think they might start being closed?
There are two components. One is those assets that are owned by the private sector. They'll make their mind up, assets like the Gateway Bridge. They do that based on when wind speeds reach a certain velocity. From our point of view, we'll do all we can to keep roads and bridges open as long as we possibly can, because we want emergency services and essential personnel to be able to still drive. Now, we also want the community to be sensible about it, and we'll give you all the information. And as the system gets closer, and as we clearly know, that system is heading in our direction, and it's expected to cross land somewhere into the early hours of Saturday, and we'll keep updating you as that information comes to hand. But we will do everything we can to keep people with the information as to when it is safe to be on the roads. And if you don't have to be driving, take the time to be at home and fortify your home.
Some of the council-run refuge centres are requiring ID for people who arrive there to sign in. Imagining it's a bit of a rush to get out of home. Do you support that? Could people be turned away? Well,
let's talk to the councils about it. We've got an afternoon hookup. Thanks for raising it. Look, I want anyone who needs help to get help, and it's an important time to do that, and I'll raise that this afternoon, so thank you.
Mr. Premier, there's countless videos doing the rounds of people going out into these tidal surges and surfing big waves. What's your message?
Well, we want people to stay safe, and so does your family. Your family wants you to stay safe as well. So, look, so often during these events, you can experience loss of life from people doing things that they otherwise wouldn't normally do. This is the time to be sensible. This is the time to do all you can to be with your loved ones and make plans and do the little things right. And we're just asking people just to be sensible in the way they conduct themselves. And the best way we can do that is explain the dangers and put forward the risks, and continue to do that. And I just really want to see people stay in one piece. We want to see people be safe. And there is no doubt there are challenges across all manner of everyone will experience some form if you're in that zone, whether it's wind, or whether it's waves, whether it's rain, whether it's flooding, or a combination of them. They're the challenges you've got to deal with. Don't go putting yourself in harm's way in the process.
Just for clarity with the SES calls, it was 1,300 requests at this morning's press conference for the past 24 hours. That 700 figure, is that new since this morning?
Today, yeah.
So now 2,000 requests.
Yeah, and look, I want to give great thanks, and we had Mark here from the SES this morning. They are, in many cases, they're people who volunteer to help their fellow humans, and they are really, really great Queenslanders. And I've been in disasters before where I've spoken to the SES volunteer, or indeed some of our emergency services, and I'll ask them, I'll say, oh, how's things going for you? And they'll say, oh yeah, my house has been flooded. And they're there helping other people. And nothing fills you more with a sense of pride and genuine admiration when you hear that. That happened to me just in Ingham just the other day. The fire officer who I spoke with, his house was in one of the lowest lying parts of the district, and he hadn't had a chance to do anything for him. He was helping others. And so we have to be grateful with that. But that shows you the kind of people who make up those organisations.
Premier, do you have any information about some sort of mass hoax text, supposedly from Energex, sent to people, and any sort of investigation around that?
No, Alex, I haven't. We'll do everything we can to make sure that the information we provide is on time, factual and clear, and that disaster.qld.gov.au is a great point of truth. If it's on there, it's legit.
There has been some confusion from residents in low-lighting areas as to whether they can park their cars in a Westfield and leave it there overnight or something like that.
Yeah.
Have you had conversations with these companies to allow that to happen?
We haven't. Let me answer it this way, Cameron. If somebody takes the initiative to go and put their car into a safe place, I would hope that they are supported in that journey. And we want everyone to be good corporate citizens and good community citizens at the moment. And I'm urging people who know that they might be in harm's way to try and find a way that you can get yourself and some of your items safely while you can now. And that's why I spoke this morning about this is the window to be able to do that. And then know your plan when the event happens, when that cyclone gets closer to the coast, when those winds pick up, and afterwards when the rain occurs. It's too late when the disaster is underway to then be making a plan. Now's the time to do that.
Just some questions for the Bureau.
Yes, McAllister.
Is there a possibility that Alfred could speed up overnight?
Very low probability that the system will increase in speed. What we've seen over the past 24 hours is that erratic movement, and in fact slightly slower. So that is the main concern, and you're watching really closely the current data to say, the movement at the moment is about 7 kilometres per hour, quite slow towards the west. But if it continues that track, and that's what's in the forecast, but like I said, very closely monitoring that updated information. And as I also said earlier, as it approaches the coast, as it moves across the islands and gets into that sort of complicated area, we will see the system do some unusual things, and that's the case for many cyclones as they cross the coast with that coastal transition.
And just some clarification on two things. Firstly, there's been some confusion, I guess, differing of opinions on the category of when Alfred falls, or makes landfall, sorry. How certain are you that it will be Category 2 and not weaker or stronger?
The current forecast has a Category 2 system. As it just gets to the outer islands off Moreton, it does start to decay. So the strength as it crosses the island is expected to be somewhere between that Category 1 and Category 2. It is too early to say exactly which side of that threshold it will fall, and it will likely weaken further as it crosses the bay through that sort of more complicated environment, as I said.
And on rainfall, we've had up to the 800 mil kind of figure thrown around the past couple of days. Sure. Because it's slowed down, there's been a bit of confusion there of how it can be the same figure if it does linger as it crosses the coast. Could it be much larger than that?
Sure. So the rainfall is in some sense driven by the strength of the system and how quickly it goes across the coast. And then there's a complicated interaction with the topography, for example, through the scenic rim and those areas. And we know that in these systems, there are certain point locations that get very high rainfall figures, and then some that don't see those. It can be highly variable in terms of rainfall. So the current warning talks about 250 to 400 millimetre daily totals. So if we think of that over 2 days and possibly more, then we may see up to 800 millimetres, and some point locations which may even get more than that. But they won't be widespread, those really high values. It is the expectation at the moment.
Last fire. Just one quick. Sorry, thank you, sir. There's a report of a boy who's miraculously survived being in a caravan. A tree fell on the caravan. You may or may not know about it, but does that give us an indication of the various different risks that people are going to be under over the coming days that you'll have to deal with?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned earlier, the department is very much prepared to respond to any of those call types, but it is an indicator of the threat that is posed to the community. So whether it's wind, whether it's floodwater, storm surge, all of those impacts are real, and people need to take heed of those and make appropriate decisions and put themselves in the right place to do and manage through the crossing.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was the Queensland Premier David Crisafulli speaking there. He says there's been over 700 requests for SES assistance now. The Premier says there are 1,030 schools that are closed and will remain closed tomorrow. The government will continue to assess into the future and will update people as to what that looks like after the system goes through. Now, the Bureau of Meteorology says the cyclone remains a Category 2 system, currently 240 kilometres east of Brisbane. There were a few other messages there from David Crisafulli, the Premier of Queensland, with his update. Second update of the day, we've seen multiple updates throughout this weather system. He says if you do the preparation, the system can handle it, so they feel like they are very prepared for this weather event. He suggests that everyone should have an evacuation plan and that should involve friends and family, and as a last resort you go to the evacuation centres. and also says that in relation to people who've been riding the big waves, we've seen some of this. It's certainly a big theme if you look online. People really, who are surfers and others, really enjoying the huge waves. He says that people should be safe and cautions against that sort of behaviour too. So that's David Crisafulli, who is the Queensland Premier, providing an update. Well, we're in the unusual position of having multiple days leading up to this tropical cyclone Alfred. I spoke to the Special Envoy for Disaster Recovery, Tony Sheldon, about what recovery plans will look like from this extraordinary weather event once it does make landfall. Tony Sheldon, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks very much, Patricia, and good day to all your viewers as well.
There are a lot of people watching this afternoon very concerned. You're in Ballina. Can you give us a sense of exactly what's happening in Ballina and that region right now?
Well, there's a lot of trepidation because of what happened in 2022 and the unexpected level of waters that came and floods that came through. But I've been coming up here for now close to 18 months, and I've got to say, meeting the councillors and local community groups, they are as prepared as you can possibly be for the events that's coming. And I've seen the community out at Lismore earlier today, yesterday, and communities right across the Northern Rivers since Monday. One thing is very clear, and that is that the businesses, many are closing up to make sure that they've got to higher ground. We're not seeing the same challenges we had before, but I'm still definitely concerned about individuals, that they are taking this very seriously, that this is regardless of the weather patterns varying, we know the cyclone is on its way.
Look, that's an interesting point you make. We hear about it sort of changing its course and we're getting updates. Are you worried that some of those updates might send a message that it's nothing to worry about, that the delay might create a false sense of security?
Well, I think particularly in the Northern Rivers, the community up here are battle ready. Many of the people have gone through floods, bushfires and drought in the Northern Rivers, so they know what natural hazards can come like, and they can become humanitarian disasters. Very few of them have actually confronted the severe winds that are going to be produced from the tropical cyclone, and that does concern me, that people need to be prepared for weather events they haven't experienced before, no matter how battle ready they are, and also those newcomers that haven't had that long history up here. So I'd just say this very, very clearly to the public, that if you're asked to evacuate, evacuate. If you're asked to stay home, whatever you do, stay home. This is an important piece of the puzzle to make sure that the whole community is ready and battle ready. The services are up here. The New South Wales State Government has got more services than we've ever seen before, and I'm repeating that from the local community that are telling me, and the local mayors. But it's now up to individuals to make sure that they are switched on, mindful and ready.
Look, we know, Senator, that the community had to take it into their own hands when they appeared to be not getting any help from authorities in 2022. It's left, I think, lasting trauma for many people who I've spoken to over the years. What are the lessons from that period that have been heeded, and can you guarantee that those mistakes won't be repeated?
Well, first of all, PK, those same comments that you just mentioned have been expressed to you, have been expressed right across the Northern Rivers arising out of that 2022 event. I'm confident that every level of government are determined to make sure that the same mistakes aren't made, but the predictability of what will happen with this event means that individuals also have to be ready, along with all the provisions that have been made by the extra services that have been put in place. And I was just out with Surf Lifesavers and the SES in Ballina today, and up with the SES crew out in Lismore, and yesterday with community groups in the Tweed. And everyone's very ready for the events. There is swift water support teams, the state SES, are ready there, prepared. We've got community members coming from all over New South Wales. I just want to put a plug out for all those volunteers. You're really making a difference, because those stand-ups that we've done on other media outlets, but also in community events, hearing that all of New South Wales is coming together to be here, to back in the local community, means that this is going to be a different event, but it's a serious event. There is a new challenge with these high winds that many people haven't experienced before, but we've got as much as, at this point, we can have in place, but we need the local community to also be aware, be prepared, and follow those directions and keep aware of what's is being communicated out of appropriate social media, and also, of course, with such as the ABC.
I know you've been speaking to the mayors over that region. What are they telling you about their preparedness and about the federal supports that have been provided? Are they asking for more bespoke kind of solutions? What are your conversations?
Look, I think what's particularly rewarding over the last 18 months, and again just in the last, obviously this last fortnight and week as things have intensified, there is a real cooperation between local government, state and federal, and a lot of the local government mayors, a lot of those really practical things that the locals understand, everything from evacuation centres to making sure that there is the support coming forward after the event. And part of that is that this is the first time both state governments, Queensland and particularly here in New South Wales as well, and the federal government have actually announced funding processes to commence as of today. So there is a stand-up of the funding arrangements, not only a stand-up of the battle-ready groups in the services that are provided to make sure that we're ready for the event itself. So preparedness is there, the funding is there, the first time ever that this has been stood up so quickly and early, and I can assure councils that, as they will rightly say and demand that we get those that support out as quickly and smartly as we can once the state governments make application.
Just finally, what does this look like for you over the next couple of days? No doubt you also have to have a plan for when this hits. Can you give us an insight?
Well, yeah. I've just in the of course, working out where's the best places to stay, because we don't want to be part of the event, nor would anybody else to be there. But we're in Ballina. I'll be here through the event at least until Monday, and quite possibly later into the week. But also, I'll be back here within days after the event as well, and I'll be here right through as we're doing the recovery. We're hoping for the best, but we know we have to prepare for the absolute worst. Some areas in this district will get 700 millimetres of water, and we've got to prepare for the worst as a community. I'm going to be here side by side with everybody, and I'll tell you what, those local mayors will make sure that I am here, I'm listening, and I know the local community here has got a strong voice. There's some very good, I just want to just say too, just some very good MPs in Kevin Hogan from the National Party and Justine Elliott up there in the north, up towards Tweed. Greens, blue, red, colours don't count. We're actually all here committed to make sure that the community is best served, and that's our plan, not only leading up to the event, during the event, but also making sure that we hear the community after the event.
Thank you so much for joining us, Senator.
Thanks very much, PK.
Well, communities in north-east New South Wales are preparing for the impacts of tropical Cyclone Alfred, 3 years after catastrophic floods devastated much of that region. The Lismore Mayor, Stephen Krieg, fronted the media today and says although his heart breaks for the flood-ravaged community, they're much better prepared than they were in 2022.
Well, this is like the reformation of the Beatles, isn't it? The band's back together, sadly, for our community to have to deal with this again. And it's heartbreaking, to be honest, but one thing that I can say that I'm extremely proud of is to see early preparation and people who are so much better off right now than what we were in 2022.
Justine Elliott is the federal Labor MP for Richmond, whose electorate is very much in the path of the cyclone in the northern New South Wales region of Lismore, and joins me now. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Patricia.
Describe to me where you are.
I'm here at the Kingsford Cape. It's one of the many evacuation centres that we've got right throughout the region. These all opened at 4 o'clock yesterday. And at this particular evacuation centre, there's over 100 people. And this area is quite close to a lot of low-lying caravan parks. So a lot of the people that are at the evacuation centre are from those caravan parks. And it's really important to have all of those evacuation centres open early. We've encouraged those people who are really keen to go into them to please go there now if they've got concerns. But they are all up and running now. I've been to a number throughout the day. And it's just really part of all of that preparation that's been going on with all levels of government, as we are all extremely concerned as to what the impact of this cyclone might be on our community, and a community that was so devastated 3 years ago by those massive floods.
Yeah, and this must be really re-traumatising for a lot of people in such a short amount of time. Justine Elliott, give me a sense of the emotions in that evacuation centre and the other ones you visited too. I imagine that people are really stressed.
Look, people have been really stressed here since those huge floods 3 years ago. Often every time it rains, people get concerned. So it has been a very difficult time over the past week to 10 days as people are becoming more and more aware of the potential reality of the cyclone. But I think what's happened in this case, the level of preparation and communication with people, and everybody has been out there working together to do that, all levels of government, all community groups, right across our Facebook groups everywhere, and people have been stepping up to volunteer and assist one another. So whilst as a community we've been through a really difficult, stressful time 3 years ago, we are as a community very connected, very strong. We have wonderful volunteers. And we all really care about each other, and people are stepping up everywhere with their neighbours, at evacuation centres, helping out, wherever they can, people assisting with older people, getting sandbags, pulling in on them at every level. And I think also the extent of the preparation that we've had, and I think you spoke earlier to Senator Tony Sheldon, it's been great to have him on the ground here up here as well, has been I think a real reassurance to a lot of people in terms of having the time to establish everything. We have the resources from the SES, and I was just down in Ballina talking with some of them, and also Dave from Premier Chris Minns was there too. Great to have him on the ground. And we had at the SES a whole lot of surf lifesaving volunteers who've come up here from right throughout the state. I mean, there are people coming from everywhere to help us, and we really appreciate it. And we have those systems in place for planning and preparation, and we are absolutely, we are all hoping for the best, that it's not too serious, but we have to plan for that worst possible scenario. And we have done that and worked really closely with the community, all the agencies and every level of government.
I know you've been talking to lots of your constituents. What have they been telling you specifically, Justine, about what they expect in coming days, given what happened last time was just not good enough by anyone's standards?
Well, look, I mean, of course, flooding is the big impact here that caused so much devastation last time. So a lot of people have been talking about making their own plans for evacuation, staying with family and friends. Some have planned to come to evacuation centres as well. We've also had to have preparation and planning, of course, in terms of the cyclone and the potentially huge, strong winds that we may have as well. I think a lot of people have really focused on the planning, and they've been encouraged to contact the agencies as well. They know to reach out to the SES if they have any concerns. The whole community is very attuned to the situation that we're in, and we are all in this together, and we will get through it. And it has been a very difficult week. People are very much focused on those next few days and how we navigate that.
And of course, the cyclone, has slowed, and that's, I think, been confusing perhaps for the public. What does that mean, that it's delayed when we will see it hit? Have you been fielding questions about that and kind of making sure people are prepared and that they don't sort of lower their guard and think that this isn't going to be as bad as perhaps they might think because of these changes?
Oh, look, absolutely, Patricia. And of course, now what we're hearing, and of course it does change quite a lot, that cyclone might be crossing over on Friday night or Saturday morning. We've been making it really clear to people that we need to be on guard the whole time. And in a sense, we do have an extra day of preparation, which is good. But people have to be just as aware that this is extremely concerning. And I think for our community, having been through those floods 3 years ago, people are very aware and they are very connected to other community members, and everyone's on the apps and everyone's sharing that all the time. Everyone is aware, and if they've got older relatives who may not be, they will see them. They will talk to them about it so that everybody can be aware of what's happening.
And what's your own plan for that, really, the next couple of days? Are you going to be on the ground, or have you got your own plan to make sure that you and your own family are safe?
Well, I'll be at home with my family, and hopefully we'll wait and see what happens. I'm out and about in the community every day, and today and yesterday talking to everyone at the evacuation centres, and I certainly want to be out as quickly as I can to be talking to people and assisting them in any way possible, and I'll continue to do that. Particularly, we're providing all the support to local constituents through phone calls, emails, or on my Facebook page. Please, anybody reach out anytime for any assistance that they may need.
Justine, take care. I know it's a difficult time, but a really important conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Patricia.
Well, moving overseas now, the United States has cut off intelligence sharing with Ukraine in the latest sign of deteriorating relations between Washington and Kiev. This, of course, follows the Trump administration's halting of military aid shipments to Ukraine as part of its efforts to pressure the war-torn nation into negotiating with Russia. US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz says he thinks there will be movement on several fronts with Ukraine very soon.
We have taken a step back and are pausing and reviewing all aspects of this relationship. I think we're going to see movement in very short order.
Well, still on the cyclone, opposition leader Peter Dutton is facing criticism over reports he left his electorate in Brisbane, which is in the pathway of Cyclone Alfred, to attend a party fundraiser hosted by a billionaire pub and club boss. And I want to talk now to one of our experts in all of this, Jacob Grieber, to unpack it. Welcome to the program, Jacob.
G'day, PK.
So what happened?
Well, he was telling everybody on Wednesday morning that he was battening down the hatches and getting ready for this storm at his own property north of Brisbane. He did an interview with a radio station where he sort of said it was bad taste to be talking about election and campaigning. The focus needed to be on dealing with this natural weather disaster. The previous hours, though, the day before, the night before, he was in Sydney raising money for his campaign. He also attended a church meeting, and then we're learning from reporting in the Financial Review that he met with Justin Hems at his Harbourside mansion. That was a fundraiser. He'd also met with a property developer earlier in the day. So it's very much opened a weakness for the opposition leader. The government has been treading a very delicate path, focusing on the storm, batting away questions about when the election will be called or not. And now you have this seeming contradiction, I think you could call it, between what the opposition leader's sort of saying up front. Meanwhile, at the background, he's still busily raising money.
Yeah, and it kind of has been talked about. I mean, obviously Labor has a reason for wanting to amplify this, but it did happen. Jim Chalmers talked about it on radio, I understand, this morning. He's the Treasurer. He's also in the cyclone's path, of course. He's a Brisbane MP. Logan is his electorate. What did he have to say about this?
Well, he did handle it quite delicately, but he said, look, if it's true, then, that's unfortunate. I don't know if we have a clip of it, PK.
Unfortunately, we couldn't get it together,
right.
But what he says is that would be disappointing if it's true. I'm not sure if it is, but that would be disappointing, he goes on. He also, though, referred to being at a briefing and that Peter Dutton left the briefing. He also mentioned that in his press when he talked this morning.
Yeah, so Peter Dutton left that briefing and went to Sydney, flew to Sydney for those fundraising events, as I mentioned earlier. Now, it has triggered a bit of consternation around the traps. I've got to say also on the coalition side, people are they're pretty nervous about it because it's a contradiction. You're doing one thing, you're doing sort of interviews with TV stations demonstrating that you're, battening down the hatches, as I said, but you're doing this other thing as well. And I think there's a bit of nervousness around on the coalition side about how this is all playing out.
Well, he did say that if the Prime Minister were to call an election this weekend, he would be, displaying he has a tin ear. So he has been heaping on some pressure on the Prime Minister, and I think that's why it also looks as it does to be rather strange to be leaving a briefing and then going to a fundraiser, right?
The Prime Minister is in a very difficult position at the moment. He does not have particularly easy options when it comes to the politics and the timing of this election. This weekend was clearly when he had intended to go after going out to Western Australia, watching Roger Cook presumably win comfortably and then fly back to Canberra and call an election. Now, the cyclone's thrown all of that overboard. It's very difficult to go to an election when the wind is probably still blowing. It'll not be clear on Sunday morning if these forecasts that the storm won't peak until Saturday are true. It might not be clear on Sunday morning how much damage there is, how far the flooding has gone, and that sort of pushes his timeline to call an election for April 12 into Monday. He has until the end of Monday, but he's very much waiting for more information that doesn't exist at this point in time because the storm is still offshore. When he gets that information, when it becomes clear, he can make a choice. Does he risk opening up an election campaign when people are still dealing with the consequences of this natural disaster, if it indeed turns out to be hopefully not, but a very bad one? Or does he have to go at a different date? And that opens the door to, as we've been discussing, another budget or a long campaign without a budget. That's also an option. So when Dutton then goes off and sort of breaks the script, if you like, it's sort of opening a bit of a door for Albanese, I think, to actually call the election.
It's interesting you say that. Like the Treasurer who was critical of Peter Dutton for doing this, he told me that he had a plan to be in North Queensland on Tuesday, in Canberra on Wednesday for national accounts. He cancelled both of those because of what was happening in his community. That's how serious the situation is. And I think drawing the comparison with Peter Dutton going to this Sydney fundraiser with a very, very rich donor, I think this is a political problem, isn't it? If you look at history, we remember Scott Morrison, of course, not holding a hose. Now, of course, the opposition leader is not the Prime Minister, but he could be very soon. And so that's where the problem is.
Yeah, I wouldn't subscribe to this point of view because I don't think it's quite at that level. But someone did sort of say to me, well, I hope this isn't, the Hawaii moment, which is that, of course, notorious moment during the bushfires. I don't think it's at that level yet, but it's certainly got people quite nervous, including in the coalition.
Jacob, thank you.
Thanks, PK.
Let's bring in Emergency Management Minister Jenny McAllister to get the latest on what we're seeing, of course, in the cyclone's path. Jenny McAllister, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Patricia.
So the BOM is now predicting the cyclone is going to cross in the very early morning of Saturday morning. We think maybe between Noosa and Coolangatta. Is that the latest you have?
Look, I think for the last few days, the BOM's been really clear that this cyclone is tracking westward. They've also been clear that there'll be some uncertainty about precisely where, when the cyclone will cross the coast and how strong it will be at the point that it crosses. All of that really reinforces the core message that we've been giving to communities. We've been saying you need to get yourself in touch with really good sources of information about this cyclone. You need to prepare yourself, your house and your family. And you also need to be in a position where you can get good advice from authorities so that you can take that advice, heed it, and keep your own family and yourself safe.
Now, you're obviously getting constant updates and we are hearing constantly about how much this cyclone is changing as we await for ultimately the damage it does. What do those updates tell you? Do they calm you down at all, Minister, that perhaps this won't be as bad as we thought, or is your anxiety still pretty high on this?
Patricia, I'm not anxious. What I'm keen to do is actually make sure that we are taking the steps that are necessary to get ready. And what does reassure me is the level of preparation that's been going on that I can see. I've been here since Monday on the ground in Brisbane. I'm in very regular contact with my counterparts in New South Wales, and of course NEMA, the National Emergency Management Agency, is embedded in both of these operations. Now, what I can see are state governments, the Minns and Crisafulli governments, pre-deploying resources, making sure that they've got the necessary personnel in place, and most importantly, clearly messaging to the community about the steps that they can take to look after themselves. These are the things that make a difference in a natural disaster. Now, we can't control what will happen with TC Alfred, but what we can do is control our level of preparation. And I've been incredibly heartened both by the work of the authorities in both these states, but also by the way that the communities here are responding to that and getting themselves ready for these events.
Jenny, there have been delays in the rollout of a national emergency messaging system. That was actually a Royal Commission recommendation. Doesn't that leave people exposed?
I think it's really important that we tell the community that they do have good access to good sources of information. Emergency Alert will provide people with text messages about the situation in their area. We've also got the Australian Warning System, which provides people with really clear advice about what they need to do in their own community. And of course, we have the national broadcaster and a range of other broadcasters who are providing really good information about the emergency. What we always say to people is that you need to give yourself access to multiple sources of information. We can't be certain that every channel will stay active during an emergency. What matters is that people avail themselves of the very good official information that is out there at the moment.
The Prime Minister has stationed himself at Canberra's National Situation Room for what looks like the foreseeable future. How is the federal government coordinating this? Obviously, we know that the state governments have the lead, but what is the purpose, if you can explain the mechanics of how you're organising this, of the Prime Minister being there and being able to potentially deploy resources?
Yeah, so look, states and territories do lead in a response, and we don't want to get in their way, but we do want to be really good helpers. And so in part that means maintaining very strong awareness across our government about the situation in each of these states, what's going on for the communities in the Northern Rivers and here in southeast Queensland, and making sure that when these state governments do ask us for additional resources to help with their response, we're in a position to respond really quickly. So for example, we've already provided more than 300,000 sandbags into Queensland that have been distributed out into the local government areas for community to use. We've pre-positioned our national aerial helicopters, the heavy lift helicopters, so that they'll be available should that be necessary in the aftermath of this event. And of course today you've seen the Prime Minister indicate that we will make ADF resources available after Alfred crosses the coast, if required here in Queensland at the request of the Queensland Government. Having the National Situation Room active, having a National Emergency Management Agency in place, stood up, fully funded and able to integrate into these state operations is incredibly significant. These are all things that were not in place before we came to government.
And just to get a sense,
I will just say that we came to government knowing we had to stand up a greater capability because communities expect us to play that role under these circumstances.
And just to be clear, does that mean the Prime Minister in that position is in constant conversations with the two premiers as well, trying to ensure that that coordinated response is really clear?
Look, I'll leave it to the PM to talk about the conversations that he has with premiers, but I think you've seen in his public statements that he has been in contact directly with Premier Crisafulli and Premier Minns I certainly maintain very regular contact with my counterparts in both of those governments. It's really important that we're able to collaborate and that we've got a shared situational awareness, because the community expects us to work together. And that's what community want to see, all of us working together in the national interest.
Minister, many thanks for your time.
Thanks, Patricia.
And to some breaking news before we go. Victoria Police say they were called to Avalon after reports a man with a firearm attempted to board a commercial flight. The man was detained before getting onto the plane and police were called. Police said they were called to the airport at around 2:50 p.m. and the man was detained before he got onto the plane. Officers took the man into custody. That is a breaking story this afternoon, and we will bring you the latest. Well, that's afternoon briefing for today. Stay with us here on the ABC News Channel. Joe O'Brien is up next. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.
Destructive winds and cancelled flights in southeast Queensland. Cyclone Alfred makes its presence felt.
There are waves, there is wind, there is rainfall, and there will be flooding.
And thousands of northern New South Wales residents prepare to evacuate. Big rain